poem Still I Rise is a well-known poem about racial injustice and about the strength of the black woman and black people in general in the face of this oppression. Maya Angelou is a very well-known poet and writer, and she was awarded over 50 honorary degrees. She's a professor. She was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama, and she was also a friend of Oprah Winfrey, someone that Oprah Winfrey admired very much. And you may have heard this. She famously said, "I've learned that people forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And so there's an invitation perhaps to consider how this poem makes us feel and how it challenges us. She was born Marguerite Annie Johnson and brought up by her grandmother. Her brother came up with her nickname Maya because he couldn't pronounce her name. And she lost her voice because her uncle killed the man who sexually molested her. And she felt like she couldn't speak after that. She felt like she was responsible for that death. She lived a fascinating life. She won a scholarship to study dance and drama. She fell pregnant in high school and graduated a few weeks before her child was born. She married a Greek sailor. She became a nightclub singer. She married a South African civil rights activist, moved to Cairo, was the editor for the Arab Observer, spoke many languages, French, Spanish, Italian, Arabic, and Fanti, and met the dissident leader Malcolm X, and was also closely linked to Dr. Martin Luther King. And his assassination fell on her birthday in 1968 and left her devastated. And then I've mentioned that she was awarded this Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama in 2011. A wonderful honor for a wonderful woman. Okay, that's a short video about how she lost her voice. And if we were in the classroom, I would certainly be playing you that video and asking you to pick up a pen and note the rhyme scheme. But because this is a video revision of the poem, I'm going to move straight on and go over the rhyme scheme with you. The poem consists mostly of quatrains, which are 4-line stanzas, and the rhyme scheme is very regular within each stanza until the shift occurs, and then the stanzas are longer. You'll see that we move from stanza 7, which is a quatrain, into stanza 8. And the lines increase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then in stanza 9, 7, 8, 9. So the lines become longer and longer. And what's also very interesting is the line length within each of these stanzas, and we'll take a closer look at that now. Okay, so whilst I read the poem, have another look at the imagery in each stanza, and then we'll look more closely at it. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides. Just like hope springing high. Still, I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. And then the shift occurs, and now take a look at the line length. The shift occurs after this. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? And then you'll see the line length changing. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So a very, very powerful poem. And you'll note that it begins with this idea of being like dust and rising. And I'm just waiting for the poem to load, sorry. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. So the first thing that you'll probably notice is that it's in the second person. And so she's addressing us, as she's addressing the reader, and she's addressing the oppressor. And she's asking us to consider what she's saying. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may lie about me. You may trod me in the dirt, but like dust I'll rise. So this image of dust being quite light, and despite this trodding in the dirt, and no matter what you do, she's going to rise. And she represents African American people in this poem, and I believe also more extensively people oppressed more generally. And then in the next stanza, she says, does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. And this word sassiness is the first thing that jumps out at me, as well as the fact that she now starts to begin to directly ask us questions. Are you upset when people who you feel are lower than you are a bit cheeky, a bit sassy? Hierarchy, we see hierarchy everywhere. And in some instances, perhaps hierarchy is useful. But when it comes to racial oppression and segregation, it certainly isn't. And so for a grown black woman to be considered sassy or cheeky, and for this to seemingly upset the oppressors, because she walks confidently as though she were just as wealthy as an oil baron, because she says I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Fascinating simile. And so she challenges this idea of racial segregation and racial superiority, because her sassiness is appropriate. It's an appropriate response to racism. And she continues to use similes like this. In the next stanza, she talks about moons and suns and tides. And so these similes are also quite interesting, because when we think of the moon, the suns, and the tides, they're linked. We think about the moon and tides being linked. And she's saying just like that, just like these things that are certain, that are above us in the sky and are set there and there when you wake up and go to bed. And the tides, time and tide waits for no man, the famous saying goes. The tides are absolutely certain. You couldn't go to the beach and tell a wave to stop. You just you couldn't, and it wouldn't. It is as certain as that hopes will spring high, and that she will rise. So just like that stable moon and sun and tides, those things that are unchanging, that are there, just like that, just like hope that springs high, and that links to the idea of the waves and the tide springing high, perhaps. Still like that, she will rise. Still. Okay, the next stanza, the tone shifts somewhat, and this stanza more graphically describes pain and oppression and suffering, and asks the oppressor, did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? So again, she uses simile, shoulders falling like teardrops, and that's what that image shows. Is that what you wanted? Did you want to see that? She asks. And then it shifts again and goes back to her strength and empowerment despite oppression. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. So again, This idea of haughtiness is something that people who feel that they are better than others might display. They might look down at others down their nose. They might be haughty in a sense. And it links to sassiness. If one looks at the two stanzas and compares them, here she's saying, does my haughtiness offend you? Before it was her sassiness. And in the previous stanza about that sassiness, she spoke about having oil wells pumping in her backyard, and now she has gold mines digging in her backyard. So like a wealthy person, like the empowered white people during the civil rights movement who had the majority of the wealth and the privilege, like that, like their inappropriate haughtiness, their inappropriate feelings of racial superiority. She can be just as haughty, and not in the negative sense, but in the sense of confidence. She's confident. She knows that she is a worthwhile and equal person. And so these similes again are very powerful and interesting. Then she says, you may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. And here she repeats, you can do this, you can do that, and you can do the next thing, and still I'll rise. And it becomes increasingly more violent. Shooting with words that shows how painful words can be. Cutting with eyes, in some ways that might be worse, that might be more painful to be cut. And then kill is the final thing. And you may kill me with your hatefulness. And this isn't just metaphorical, because racism and hate does kill. It has led to that extreme. And then she says, does my sexiness upset you? So this again links to the idea of sassy, haughty, now sexy. We had oil, we had gold, and now we've got diamonds. Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? That in her strength and confidence as a black woman, her wealth isn't gold or oil or diamonds. It's her as a woman. It's what she has to offer. It's her strength and confidence. And it's a fascinating simile, like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs. And so it links to her powerful sexuality as a woman. Does it come as a surprise that I am so sexy? So racist people might find themselves quite surprised that they might find a black woman sexy, and she addresses that. She addresses that powerful sexuality and femininity. And it reminds me of Sojourner Truth's famous poem where she talks about being a woman. Ain't I a woman? Am I not also a woman? And should not be treated like less than. And then the shift occurs, which we've spoken about, and now we're referring explicitly to history's shame, and so that's slavery, a past that's rooted in pain, but still, despite that, I rise, and then she has this superb image. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. This absolutely stunningly powerful image of a black ocean, this powerful natural force that can't be stopped, like the certainty of tides in the earlier stanza. She is the black ocean that bears in the tide. It's a certainty, the strength that she has as a black ocean, a strong woman. And then the final stanza, and I rise, I rise, I rise, I rise. It's repeated 5 times in the stanza, and they're short, choppy lines to foreground the strength, leaving behind the nights of terror and fear. I rise. So we've got nights, and then we have daybreak. I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. So this isn't just literal, this is metaphorical. So we leave behind the oppression and the fear and the hatred and the killing and shame and pain and all of that. We leave it behind and we rise, and we bring the gifts that my ancestors gave, because I am the dream and hope of the slave, and the slave would have hoped for this emancipation, this freedom, this empowerment, and she embodies that dream and hope. I rise, I rise, I rise, she repeats at the end. Okay, so we noticed quite a lot of the images related to wealth. We had the oil, we had the diamonds, we had the gold in the backyard. And so these allusions to wealth and power are an inversion of expectations because, racial injustice would have signaled a lack of autonomy, a lack of opportunity to become wealthy, to do well. And so she challenges that, and there's an inversion of that in the poem. And it's helpful to understand that it was written during the civil rights movement, but it doesn't mean that the poem is only relevant for that period in history. It's still relevant today. If one thinks about George Floyd and perhaps even Meghan Markle more recently, we've still got work to do, and we're addressed directly in this poem in the second person you. Despite oppression, the central message to the oppressed and the marginalized is one of strength, of empowerment, and it's a very strong and empowering poem. So she's speaking about her own oppression as a Black American woman, but also about universal oppression, past, present, and future, including slavery, which is still a contemporary issue. She conjures up powerful imagery related to wealth, prestige, etc., denied Black people, and uses it to demonstrate her own inner strength as a Black woman. She will not be kept down. She will rise. Okay, so I'm going to end the lesson here, and I encourage you now to go back to the imagery that we identified and make sure that you have identified where there are similes, where there are metaphors, and where there are personification, so that you can note that down in your notes.